There's so much going on in the world right now. A lot of people are going through a lot of difficult times. With that, all three of us, we decided to do a series on product management interviews. What type of interview rounds will be there, and how should an interview answer for each of these questions? So, if you know someone who's going through any of the difficult times, and if someone is interviewing for product management, please do share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe as well. Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast, Everything Product. We talk about latest technologies with a product mindset. This is Phani. I'm a product manager at a startup.
This is Srinath. I work as a product ops manager at Twilio.
Hello, everybody. This is Siddhu Saladi. I'm a product manager working for Best Buy.
Awesome. And getting into our topic, one of the most prominent product management interview rounds is product design, or in another sense, it's also called product sense. What that question basically means, or it typically is like, take any of your favorite products and tell us how you would improve. So let me start with a very simple question, right? Siddhu, why do you think a product design question is important, and why do interviewers ask this question?
Yeah, so I'd say product design interview is like the interview for all the product managers, right? So I think that's the first point. And the second one is it basically helps the interviewer understand the, how the person is navigating when he's given a problem from an idea to a product. So that gives him his understanding and how he would prioritize things and all of that stuff, and get to that final place where he's kind of creating the product, which correlates with a day-to-day job of a product manager. So that's why I would say this is the most important interview for any product manager.
Yeah, that's true. Basically, the interviewer will be able to understand whether a product manager knows end-to-end what to do when he's given a problem. Srinath, what do you think, or why do you think this question is important?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo similar to what you both said. It's basically the interviewer is checking our product, solving capabilities. Taking a problem, comprehending that, and dividing that into kind of like how you take that problem, divide it, and achieve a solution. That's what they are looking at, how you navigate various ambiguities. You probably, when you're building a product, you will be coming up with various unknowns. So during that unknowns, how do you think about like assumptions such as those? So how you navigate through all those and come up with a solution? I mean, one thing to keep in mind here is, I mean, there is no right or wrong answer here. It basically they are checking how structured you are and how you navigate the problem and how you arrive at the solution. Basically, they're just testing your thinking skills there than a right or wrong answer. So that is one thing people have to keep in mind.
That makes sense. Yeah, going back to the actual principle, right? Like whether a product manager can navigate through a problem, understand all the different circumstances, understand the customer, etc., and finally come to a solution. Cool. Let's deep dive a little bit more into this question, right? Let's say I'm the interviewer, and Siddhu, let's say I'm asking you this question to say, okay, Siddhu, consider you're the product manager for Uber Eats, and tell me how you would improve it. What do you think are the steps that you would follow, or what do you think an interviewee should follow to solve that question?
Yeah, so Phani, I think there are a lot of frameworks out there that will actually get you through this question. But I'll maybe go through steps which help me a lot, through the process. You always start with asking probing questions about what the question is, digging deep, trying to understand the scope and context of it, and then get into different kinds of goals, after which you understand what the users and segmentation are, and then you understand what the user needs are, and then you basically kind of prioritize the user needs, get into the solution and pick one solution, and then talk about success metrics, and then summarize at the end. So these are some steps which I would follow while answering the question that you asked right now.
Nice. So you're basically going from end to end, thinking about like the overall goals and then thinking about the customer, their needs, solutions, etc.
Yep.
Nice. Okay, let's deep dive a little bit more, right? The very first one you said is asking for probing questions. So I'll start with you again, Siddhu. So why do you think and why in interviewing needs to like probe questions?
Yeah, I think these questions are open-ended and also vague. Just to make sure the interviewer, it's basically testing the candidate, right, to see if he's asking questions to understand the problem better, or is he directly jumping into conclusions or solutions, right? So I think probing questions are the most important, because if you make assumptions which are not right, that could lead you to a complete different answer. So asking probing questions is the most important step in the interview process, I would say. Maybe I'll give you an example here, right? In one of the interviews questions, right, I had previously, very long back, was um, how would you develop an delivery app for Trader Joe's? So that was a very open-ended question. So what questions could you ask there, right? You could ask, okay, like why is Trader Joe's trying to develop an app? Is it losing customers, or is it losing customers to a competitor, and what is the main goal of it, and all of that stuff, right? Understand where what is even Trader Joe's, right? People might not even know, right? They might know Target or Walmart, but not Trader Joe's. So all of this, so maybe asking these questions would solidify on how I could answer this, and also help me understand the problem statement better.
Got it. Srinath, let me ask you the opposite question, right? So let's say, let's go back to the question that I was asking, or the question that Siddhu was asking. What will happen if an interviewer didn't ask for probing questions and then goes into the details about the problem? What could go wrong?
Yeah, probing questions, as you guys said, like it's one of the most important one, because that serves as a baseline on what you need to exactly tackle. So if we don't ask that question, for instance, you brought up a question saying, how do you improve the experience for Uber Eats? Okay, what do you mean experience? Is it then, are you saying I need to get more revenue? Are you saying I need to get more engagement, a number of orders, whatever that is, there can be n number of goals. So when you're trying to solve this question, you clearly need to know what is the goal that you're trying to achieve. So for that goal, based on that, in order to define that goal, you need to be very specific on the problem that you're trying to solve. As Siddhu mentioned, if it's very open-ended, then you cannot come to that specific, and which will impact in defining your goal, what you need to tackle. So this is one of the most important. So don't one thing to keep in mind for any interviews out there. So don't right away jump into solution. Take a pause, put your pen on the paper, kind of just think through what they're saying, and then come up with or clarifying. These can also be called clarifying questions. So you talk to interviewer about those. I think that will also give a good impression to interviewer that he's not directly jumping into solution, but he's thinking through the problem and trying to focus on a goal that can be achieved.
Yeah, so I would also maybe bring in another point which Srinath brought in, right? So there's no right or wrong answer. So the more questions you ask and the more you understand it, it'll actually walk the interviewer through your thought process, right? Like how is he thinking through the problem, and how is he trying to eliminate all the assumptions and make sure he has a solid problem statement to tackle for. And also questions could be as vague as build a refrigerator for blind, right? That could be a question, right? So how would you, I think you can go into 1,000 different directions if you don't ask probing questions for that.
It'll also help the interviewee to come on the same page with the interviewer, I think, because the interviewer might have whole different thought process in his mind, and if the interviewee is not answering or asking for those questions, he might have a whole different thought process. And if you don't come on the same page with the interviewer, your interview is going to go like whole different direction.
Yeah, totally. Especially during this question, what I've experienced is You interviewer and interviewer have to be at both same page. If you have a different assumption and if interviewer is expecting something different, then you are both going on different directions. So having that baseline of assumptions and having the clarification will really help. That's a great point.
Got it. Let's go to the next step, right? I know, Srinath, you already brought it up. So asking these questions would basically help us understanding the overall goal of why we are solving the problem. Can you talk a little bit more about why is that needed, what kinds of goals that you need to look at, etc.?
Yeah. So for defining a goal, I mean, you need to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's where you will discover through your clarifying questions or probing questions when you ask an interviewer. Once you set that goal, for instance, in case of Uber Eats, maybe the interviewer is referring to the number of orders in a particular day if I want to improve X to Y. So if you understand the goal that interviewer is trying to achieve is basically to increase the number of orders in a particular day, then how you define your goal is basically improve your orders from X to Y in this time frame. So that way you're more targeted, and that's how that's very important in how you define the goal.
That'll basically set you a direction on how you want to take the question also, right? Because if you don't have a
Exactly.
metric, then whatever you solve for, what are you solving for? You don't know whether you're increasing customers, you don't know whether you're increasing the revenue, etc. Siddhu, you want to add
Exactly.
anything there?
Yeah, that's right. I think picking the goal is also further narrowing down the scope of what we're trying to do, right? So goal could be engagement, goal could be activation, goal could be acquisition, goal could be monetization, right? So each of these pillars, could have a lot of different solutions in a different way. So if you basically assume this and the interviewer is assuming something different, you'll actually go to the west, right? Like completely it'll be a wild west where you're actually heading towards. So I think nailing that down will help you narrow down the problem which you're trying to solve.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, now let's say our customer, I mean, our interviewee has identified all the goals and stuff. What do you think is the next step, Siddhu?
The next step is, once we know what the goals are, is users, right? So, there are users for every product and every feature. So we have to figure out like who is our uh, segment of users who will be using them, and you could actually categorize them by age, by the job they do, and a lot of different demographics and all of that stuff. So I think nailing that down or prioritizing that user will help us create solutions specific to that user rather than a broader solution. So I think that's also a very key step, right? Where if you don't understand or nail down the user segment and understand the preferences of that, again, it's basically a much broader problem which you're trying to solve.
Actually, Srinath, let me ask you the opposite question. Let's say if I don't pick a user, I just know the goal and then I'm just going to go to solutions. What do you think will go wrong in that?
Yeah, picking a user segment is very important if you want to achieve any targeted goals. I mean, for instance, if you don't have any user segment defined, then you don't know which direction to go. For instance, if I am take your example of your question about Uber Eats, right? If I want to improve my X orders, the orders from X to Y in this location, right? So if I'm in that location, I need to basically understand who is that, like, who are the primary users? Maybe I'm just taking an example, right? If it's an area, it's in downtown. In a downtown, you expect more young crowd than an older crowd. So you need to design your menu. You need to make sure your restaurants and all that stuff are offering food which young people would like, versus probably like an older people, right? So understanding that user segment is very important whenever you're trying to solve this. If not,
you may be trying to target somewhere, like you may be trying to target in a location where that will not help you achieve your goal.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So I think similarly, right? each of the user segments would have different preferences, right? When it's a younger crowd, maybe they want it much faster, but the older crowd, maybe they want it tech savvy though, so that they can navigate through ordering the thing, right? So I think the preferences change. So I think the users are very important in that aspect.
Yep. Actually, one more thing that I want to add here, right? While an interview is identifying the customers, ask that question to the interviewee. Interviewer. Like, do you think this customer is the right customer here? Always make sure that you are on the same page with the interviewer, because if the interviewer is thinking about, like, let's say downtown, like what Srinath was mentioning, but let's say you pick the user who is family oriented customer with kids, then your solutions will be again different from what the interviewer is thinking about. So always ask the probing questions at every stage and make sure the interviewer is on the same page with you. So let's say we identify the user, right? The next big and important thing is identifying the user needs. Siddhu, how do you think we should be doing that?
So normally, the way which I try to do this is look at the user journey and see what are the points of friction on the user journey are, right? So imagine the same grocery thing, right? And maybe let's pick young professional as one of the persona which we prioritized. For the young persona, right, what could be the user needs, right? Maybe the user needs or pain points, right? Cooking food, getting grocery, right? Wastage of food, and driving to the grocery store and getting that stuff. All of these could be pain points for that. So I'd say when we look at the user journey, you will actually pick the ones which the users are facing problem, and those could be the user needs which you'll actually say that these tell it to the user interviewer, I'd say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, one more thing that I want to add here is user journey is the perfect thing. Even I do that a lot to identify what are the user needs. One more thing you could do if you're unable to do it, like put yourself in the customer shoes. Like if you are, let's say, someone who is trying to get the groceries delivered to your house, what are your user needs? It could be like you want to get it faster, you want it to be clear, you want to have like alternate sources, etc. Having that might help you like think of those user needs much better.
Yep.
Srinath, do you want to add anything in terms of user needs and identifying them?
No, I think navigating through that customer journey and figuring out all the pain points across, I mean, I think, as you said, wearing that customer shoes is pretty important when we're doing this. So we can figure out what are the top things that you need to tackle for users.
Got it. Cool. Awesome. Now we have the customer, we identified the user needs, and let's say we identified like 5 different user needs for the customer. What do you think we should be doing next to continue solving the problem? Siddhu, you want to start?
Yeah. So I'd say obviously, right, like you won't have resources to do everything which the user wants, right? But you want to do the most important thing for the user, so you could actually use a criteria to prioritize them. So normally what I do is I look at three aspects to prioritize. The first thing is the frequency of the need, like how many times is it happening, so that this actually quantifies how valuable is this problem to the user is. So that's one. And the depth or intensity of the plane, right? So there could be problems which are okayish, there could be problems where the customer is really really frustrated. So maybe we want to pick the ones which are the most intense for the customer. Frequency is one, intensity is second, and the third one is we also want to make sure we want to tie it to the mission or the goal of the product, right? Is it engagement, activation, acquisition, and all of that stuff. So I think using all of these three, we could actually prioritize one of the user needs which we want to do a solution for.
No, that's a great point, right? Because when you started the problem, you basically told that, hey, my overall goal is probably monetization. So whenever you're trying to like identifying the prioritizing the needs, you're tying back to your goal to say, hey, I want to solve this metric. So I'm trying to identify the needs which basically relate to that and solving for that. Actually, let me ask this question, right? What are we trying to show to the interviewer when we are doing this prioritization? Srinath, probably you wanna take it.
Yeah, essentially, what basically they're testing out as how we do any trade-offs, if any, like kind of when there are competing priorities, right? I mean, obviously, when you're working on a product feature, when you're working with, I'm sure a lot of people will experience this in companies when they're working with sales folks, right? So some people maybe just be very vocal, and you cannot just take, just because their voice is high, you cannot take their priority as number one. And also, a lot of times you may have very similar data or very close to data. At that time, you have to you will be facing these competing priorities. So you utilizing these frameworks that Siddhu mentioned, that frequency versus impact, and there are various other frameworks such as RISE frameworks, which is pretty popular as well, that people can generally say that during the interviews. I mean, these are some of the things that they will use, which can help them during that trade-off.
Good point. Yeah, we also did a video about prioritization principles, right? I'll definitely link that video too. So for anyone, please look at that. And if you're here watching this video, which basically I'm assuming that you're liking the video, so please don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends as well. So let's continue. Now we identify the user needs. Now I think it's the right time to identify the solutions. So how do you think we should be identifying the solutions? So let me start with you.
Yeah, so I'd say we are saying that we have picked an active professional as a user, right? And maybe let's pick one of the user needs and say that, okay, hassle, we are solving a problem of solving a problem of the hassle which the user has to cook food, get grocery, and all of that stuff. So how are we solving that? Then we get into solutioning that, because I'd say your first solution is never the best. So create multiple solutions and pick the best out of it, and flex your intuition and muscle there, right? So then you create solutions for that. How do you make sure you solve the problem for the customer, right? You could do meal kits, you could do 10-minute delivery or off meals and all of that stuff. So you would move into solutions next year.
That's true. One of the things that I've heard and learned is all the big companies always look for product managers who are creative. So this is the time where you can utilize your creativity, your creative thought process to prove that, hey, I can come up with awesome solutions for our customers. Srinath, you want to add anything there?
No, just adding both your points. I think we can be creative, and also I think we always have to be ambitious there. So whenever we are thinking solutions, I mean, do not limit yourself, like how you can probably achieve that. I mean, as long as it probably gives a good customer experience, and even if you are thinking big, that will really help give the good impression to the interviewer that he's thinking out of box and thinking big, not thinking about, oh, something can be achieved or not. I mean, even if it's not achieved, but you're still thinking through, that'll really give a good impression.
Yeah, so maybe to add one more point here. So while I was giving interviews long back, there was one person who used to do this. He used to have 3 solutions, and one solution was like a moonshot solution. He used to deprioritize that, but this was just to make sure he gets his creative juices and impresses the interviewer. Maybe that could be a tip where you can say, okay, I'm going to build an AI bot which is going to do all of the stuff for you without you doing anything, right?
That's true. Yeah. I mean, as product managers, we are the ones who set the vision, goals, and long-term strategies for the product. So we are basically showing to the interviewer to say, hey, I can make that happen for the team. Awesome. Now, let's say we have the solutions as well. What do you think is the next step, Siddhu?
Yeah. So I think as we prioritize the user needs, right, the same thing with the solutions, right? We cannot build everything and go out there and see how it's working out, right? So I think trade-offs on solutions could be done in multiple different ways, but I would maybe pick 3 things to prioritize them. The first one is the level of effort, right? Because some of the features which you would want might take a very small amount of time, but some could take months of time, right? You want to pick the smallest and also compare it with the biggest impact it would take. The second point is impact which it would create, right? And also impact in the terms of your product goal. How would it move that? So I would say that this feature is taking 2 months time, and this would basically increase our revenue by 10%. And there's also a second scenario where this feature would take 6 months, and it would increase our revenue by 20%. You would maybe pick the first one because less effort and more impact, right? So I'd say that's what I would look at when prioritizing solutions.
That's true. And one more thing that I want to add here, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, always go back to the interviewer and confirm whether he's understanding the solutions that you're giving, whether he's aligned with the prioritization principles that you're following, or does he want you to give more solutions, or is he satisfied with the solutions, or within the solutions, do you want him to add any additional details? So keep asking these questions to the interviewer so that he knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, so maybe
Srinath, do you
to add one more point, Phani. So I think that I observed this. Like initially, people were telling me when I was taking interviews, right, that make sure you keep engaging with the interviewer, as you said. Otherwise, they'll get distracted like within 2 or 3 minutes. I was like wondering, will people really get distracted, that quickly? But I experienced the same when I was doing some interviews where when people start rambling, you get distracted and you start looking at emails and all of that stuff. Now everything being remote, so there's more chance of distraction. So the more engaged you keep the conversation, the better chances of the interviewer getting impressed. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially I think this is totally possible in these kind of questions, product sense questions, where it's like a complete story, right? So when you're explaining story, you need to make sure they're following that story. They're with you, as Phani said, we have to make sure they're engaged. I mean, taking that pauses will really help and make sure both are on the same page.
And Srinath, like if I think about Amazon experience, right? Amazon is one of the companies which is like very focused or bullish on note taking. So I've seen interviewers literally like typing as you talk through. So that they have the entire notes. So even in that case, I think it helps in engaging them to say, are you actually understanding it, or are you randomly typing whatever you are understanding?
Yes.
Cool. Let's go to the next step, right? Now you prioritized all the solutions and then you gave to the interviewer to say, hey, these are all the solutions that I'll do. What do you think you should be doing next? Srinath, let me start with you.
Yeah, so then once you take that, first, I always believe in testing and learning from the solution which I'm trying to build. So I will start something small. Learn from it. I may fail. That's okay, but I'll be learning from a solution with which I went with. Then I'll take the learnings. The learnings that you get is from the metrics that you define, which is all success metrics, right? So in order to measure your solution impact, you need to define what those success metrics are, or key performance indicators that can help achieve your goal. So you need to make sure the one which started, which is the goal, which was improving Uber X, from X to Y in terms of orders. Will I be able to receive that goal with this solution? Am I reaching that goal? If not, what is the other solution that I need to test and learn? So that's how defining success metrics and monitoring those, continuously measuring and taking action is pretty important.
Yeah, that's true. And again, one more thing we need to do is always relate back to the overall goal that you have been thinking about, right? That's what you started the question with. Cool. So Siddhu, let's say we have all the metrics and stuff, and then now we are at a stage where we are concluding. How do you think we should be concluding everything to the interviewer?
Yeah, I think this should be the strongest point where you actually put in all the work together and summarize it to the interviewer, right? So even though the interviewer is like sleeping the whole time, you should be bang on saying that, okay, this is the process which I did. Like we went and said we nailed on what the product goal is. We went and did users, prioritized the users, and then we went into user needs, prioritized the user needs. Then we did solutions, talked about the trade-offs, and picked one solution, and then did success metrics. I think that'll lay out all the story together and say that, okay, this guy has actually done all the steps which check marked all the steps which you do while getting from an idea to a product launch.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
And
one thing
it'll
which I
also,
want to add. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, just saying, like, it'll also make sure that the interviewer understands everything that you did. Even if he misses something in between, if you summarize it well, then he knows clearly, like, okay, this is the exact solution that Phani gave. Srinath, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Now, one thing which I want to add, because this is kind of a pretty long interview. This can be a pretty long, it can be even 30 to 45-minute interview. So during that time, I mean, I think the person probably may not uh, fully concentrate on what you're saying. So this summary really helps. And I mean, maybe a fun example which I've seen is I've given an interview where the interviewer is just driving the car right through the interview. So
Oh.
for me, it was definitely difficult. I was not sure if he was listening or not. But one thing which I did, and what probably people can do is make sure you ask those questions. Okay, does this make sense? I mean, keep them more engaged, even when they are driving the car. I mean, they want at the end, you're trying to make sure you are the right person for the job and you can do it. And when you keep them engaged, even when they are driving, don't be distracted just because he's driving or he's not listening to you. Just make him accountable to respond to your questions. That way he'll make sure he listen to what you're saying.
That makes sense. I love the entire flow that you guys went through, right? Going back to how we end our podcast. So if there is two things that our viewers has to take away from regarding interviews and especially for product design, what do you think those two are? Siddhu, let me start with you.
Yeah, I think the first one is mock interviews. Like I stress a lot on that. So the more you mocks you do, the more you're familiar with the process, and then you actually act on the interview day, right? You get your creative juices out rather than focusing on what the process might look like and all of that stuff. So I think the more mocks you do, the better you get. The second one I would say is templates are good for the navigation and direction, but don't stick to templates. I've been hit hard a lot of times when I'm too strict to a template and the interviewer wants something different, right? So make sure you understand what the interviewer wants. The interviewer doesn't want a template, but he wants his questions answered, right? So make sure you be flexible to navigate what the interviewer wants. So these two are the two things which I would say are important.
Awesome. That's great. Srinath, what do you think?
Yeah, I think my two key takeaways here would be continuous engagement right through the interview, because this question is pretty long. So making sure that engagement is there is very important. And the second thing, I mean, think out of box. I mean, think creative. Don't limit your thinking. So you should leave an impression to the interviewer that, oh, you're just not thinking about the solutions which are immediately possible, but solutions that can be even possible in long term. So think out of box, I'll say as well, is pretty important. So these two, I would say.
Got it. I'll summarize the video with my findings, right? Or my key takeaways. Couple of things that I think the interviewer should do. The first one is have a conversation. Always talk to an interviewer, understand the interviewer, and then come in the same page with them. Because at the end of the day, whether the interviewer remembers the solution or not, he should remember you. And the second one that I would say is, like Srinath was telling, be creative. Be happy to solve a problem during the interview. Don't think of it as if someone is judging you. Think of it as something interesting that came to you, and then have a nice conversation and then have fun during the interview. Awesome. Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much for joining today and then having this fun discussion. And for everyone who's watching, like I said earlier, this is going to be a series. We'll be talking about multiple interviews. We'll also be doing like mock interviews with each other. So subscribe to the channel. You'll be getting so much more stuff about interviews. Thank you.
Thank you all.